Good work. All right. Good evening, everyone. Wow, that worked. Hi, my name is Shea Silverman. I'm going to be doing a talk on the Raspberry Pi, specifically gaming on the Raspberry Pi. So I have a bunch of these old devices, and how many people here have seen a Raspberry Pi or heard of them? Cool. So I'm just going to pass these around. So I'm passing around are both versions of the Raspberry Pi, the Model A and the Model B. Model A does not have networking enabled and only one USB port. Model B has 2 USB ports and an Ethernet port built in. Model A is $25, Model B is $35, and they're really awesome. So they are an ARM-based processor with a really cool OpenGL ES video core, half a gig of memory. They run about 700 megahertz, but you can overclock them to a gigahertz, which is really cool. And there's a lot of fun stuff you can do, and it runs Linux. So what I've been working on is a gaming distribution called PiMain. What I originally started off with was just main, and all I want to do is play Street Fighter 2 on it. But in the year it's been out, the Raspberry Pi has been able to do Neo Geo games, main, PlayStation games, Super NES, and a couple of others that I'm going to show. So let's start with Neo Geo, because I love the Neo Geo. It's probably my favorite arcade system out there. So I don't know if anybody's played Metal Slug or if it. Awesome. Now, one thing I will say is, because this is pretty much brand new hardware, there are still a lot of bugs that are going on. It may crash at some points, and when it does crash, it's really awesome. So let's see what happens. So I insert a coin. I'm sorry I don't have sound, but because I'm going through HDMI through DPI, I lose sound. But we have pretty much full speed emulation of the Neo Geo arcade system, which is really awesome. Shooting, all that fun stuff. That is Metal Slug. Okay. So some really easy 2D platforming. Let's go to Main for All. Street Fighter 2. I'm sure everybody here has heard of Street Fighter 2. All right, it's turning on. Warning. There's credits. Bitcoins, of course. And it's really hard to play on. So, I mean, this is full speed emulation of Street Fighter 2, and the neat part about this version of Main for All, it's outputting all of the commands to OpenGL. So there is a layer over the SDL component called diskman X, and what it does is any SDL coding command that you did translates it to an OpenGL ES core, sends it to the GPU, and then brings it back. So what used to happen on the old version of this, it would be very slow. I would walk, maybe, it would take maybe 2 seconds for it to even get a frame. Now we're getting full speed emulation. So this is really awesome stuff that's happening. Now, that being said, of course, Super Mario World, Super NES emulator. full speed Super NES emulator. Now I won't do Star Fox because it needs the Super FX chip, but oh well. For a $35 computer, I'm okay. You can buy a Super Nintendo for $35 to play Star Fox. So I'm okay with this. But I get full speed Super NES emulation on this $35 computer. And this has only been released for a couple months, so it's taken about a year for this to come out. But now that a lot of stuff is starting to come through, and there have been over 1 million of these sold, a lot of people are starting to port their software to it. So this is kind of awesome. A PlayStation emulator, and I'm going to be booting up Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. So this totally utilizes the OpenGL port, and it's really awesome when you realize that this little ARM processor has a GPU that's probably as powerful as like a GeForce 3, and it's probably as good as an iPhone, maybe an iPhone 3G video card. What was it? So I really wish I had sound right now, because I know maybe some Blink-182 playing or something. And of course the hanger. And emulates a CD loading. Keep a nice 2x CD-ROM speed of the original PlayStation. And there we go. PlayStation emulation on the $35 Raspberry Pi computer. So the next game I need to try this is Final Fantasy VII. So, see if I can somewhere else. See if I can break through there. Yes. Action. So, okay. Here. So, last time I did this talk was a couple of months ago at Bar Camp, which is a really awesome, it's a really awesome conference, and they hold it every year in downtown Orlando. So I went up and did my presentation on this, but in the 3 months since that has come out, there have been 2 more emulators ported over that I think are really cool that I'd like to show. Come on, Atari 2600, pinnacle of graphics and fun. Oh yeah. You watch out for this. Ah, okay. Alright, I just want to make it to the next screen so I can really screw up. Yes. So, okay. And if you really want to go farther back, adventure. This is amazing graphics. This is going to beat the PS4, right? It's a dog. So, okay. So, all right. So what has also just been released, DGen, which is a Genesis, an STL Genesis emulator. Full speed Sonic the Hedgehog emulation. I know some people think like Sonic and Knuckles, Sonic 3, but I love Sonic the Hedgehog too, so I'm going to put this one instead.
Music is good here too.
Yeah, again, I really wish I had some music. It's just so fun. So, I mean, this in in a matter of just a couple months, this was not released 3 months ago, and now we have full speed emulation on the Raspberry Pi. There are over 1 million of these little devices sold. They're just awesome. People turn them into NASs. You can make a Tor server, a torrent server. You can do all sorts of fun stuff. I have a web server running on here that allows me to upload ROMs. But it's an amazing little device. So that's it for the emulation. But I have one more thing I want to show off with that. So the Raspberry Pi, $35 computer. It's kind of funny that the camera module they just released for it, all open source is $25. So the camera is almost the same price as the hardware. Let me just turn into that really quick. So on this one, I have a small little serial display coming up there, so it should display boot up on that sideways, but in a couple seconds it's also going to boot, it's going to show the boot up on here. This is a $12 screen that can interface with the Raspberry Pi directly, so it's kind of awesome. Oh, so I'm sure everyone can see this perfectly. It's booting on the little screen here. So let's see if, okay, I have to, come on. Oh, I guess it helps if I actually plug in my keyboard. And see, that was an awesome bug. I plug in my keyboard and it caused it to reboot. That only sometimes happens. And only with this thing for some reason. That's what you get for paying $20 for a wireless keyboard and mouse. It has a laser pointer, so that's kind of cool. So at bar camp, one thing I did was I took some pictures of movies of all the attendees there. So I would like to do the same thing here. If you'll humor me, I'm going to take a couple pictures of everyone here and try and get it up on the screen. See if that works. Okay. So let's see if this will work. Smile. I'll take a picture. All right. So let's take another one. Let's do it from over here. See how that works. And let's take the one over there because I don't know that I just got anybody else. Oh well. Yeah. So let's see if I can now get this to play back. Do it. I'm sorry about this, guys. Hold on 1 second. That's cool. And see, this is the fun part about beta technology. It's now this is buffering. It's now buffering on the screen because I hit tab too many times. So it's.
Hey, question while you're waiting.
Sure.
If you have time at the end, could you talk a little bit about getting the initial setup of this thing done? Because I have one and I've had it for a while, and every time I've tried to get into it, I'm not really user at all. And so the initial steps of sort of getting off the ground would be great.
Sure. So let me boot this one back up because everybody loves gaming. So the hard drive on a Raspberry Pi is the SD card. And you can pretty much use any SD card. 4 gigs is recommended. You can get by on 2 gigs, but you'll have about 3 megs of space left on the device, which might be okay if you want to play Atari games, because I think the whole thing takes up about 2 megs. But so the Raspberry Pi, when it first boots up, the ARM core on it is disabled. The GPU is what actually boots everything up, which is why when it turns on, you may see like a rainbow pattern for a second. That's the GPU trying to boot up. It's looking on the SD card for a first partition called boot. And it's just a regular FAT32 partition. It can be read by any PC. The BIOS on it is really just a text file called config.txt. It's hard-coded into the device to look for this file. That's what tells it to start Linux or start any boot image and go from there. There are a couple of images out there. There's like my Pi main distro. The main distro is called Raspbian, and it's built atop Debian. You would download the image. You would then you'd use 132 imager or DD to copy the file onto there and make a proper image. There's a new piece of software called, I forget what the acronym stands for, but it's called NUBS, and it's made by the Raspberry Pi Foundation. What it basically does is just an OO. Sorry. What it does is you just image this. It's maybe about 100 megs. You image this file to your SD card, and then it turns the entire thing into an image that you can see on any computer. So you can pop this into your Mac, your Windows machine, or your Linux machine. Pops up like a regular file storage system. You can just drag and drop a Raspbian image, XBMC, OpenELEC, or what have you, and then it'll just boot from those images. So it's like choosing a ROM, and you just, okay, I want to start this version of Raspbian, or I want to start this image. What's cool about that is like XBMC. I don't know. XBMC originally stood for Xbox Media Center, but has been ported to a bunch of systems now. So with XBMC on the Raspberry Pi, you can watch live TV, you can stream from a bunch of channels, you can connect to your NAS or your home server, or you plug in a hard drive and you can watch all of your movies on there that I'm sure you obtain legally. And you can do all sorts of things with that. Not sure if that kind of answered your question, but okay, cool. So I'm at about 17 minutes here, so I'm pretty much done with what I want to show you. Does anybody have any questions for you regarding the Raspberry Pi, or if they'd like to see anything with it?
What kind of different controllers are there to be playing these games?
Okay, very good question. If it works on Linux, it'll work on the Raspberry Pi. I have an arcade tank stick that I plug in to play MAME with, and it works great. I know some people use, there's a thing called Xbox DRV, Xbox driver, so you can use your Xbox 360 controller on it. I think PlayStation 3 controllers work well, but I haven't tested that because it's just Bluetooth, so if you have a Bluetooth dongle, it should connect. But I'm not 100% certain on that one. So there's that kind of stuff that will work on it. If it works on Linux, it works on here. Thank you. So, neat part about it, these right here, these are GPIO pins, general purpose in and out. I don't know if anybody went and saw the Arduino presentation at the beginning. These kind of act like what an Arduino can do. These are pins that you can address through Python or through the shell or through any programs. You can attach buttons to this, you can attach sensors, you can go wild with it. I have an LCD screen attached to it. Some people have made power buttons that work on it, so there are tons of different projects. You have web browsers on it. You can do all sorts of things with the X environment as other items you can do with the Pi. That's just all I can think of off the top of my head, but there are a ton of items that are coming out for it that you can work on.
Since this isn't exactly a microcontroller, but it can do everything that a microcontroller can do,
When should you use a Raspberry Pi and when should you use a microcontroller like Arduino or the MS-P430? Okay, so because this is running a full operating system stack, when you're running something like this, you won't get full real-time operations like you'll get with the Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi, or I'm sorry, with the Arduino. When you program the Arduino, you know per cycle what's going to happen. You're always going to get that polling at this exact second. You're always going to be able to talk to that pin. You're always going to be able to do that interrupt. When you're running on the Raspberry Pi, a Python script may hit an infinite loop. You may run out of memory. Somebody may SSH into your device through the internet at some point. So those are the kinds of things you want to consider. Now, you can do a lot with the Raspberry Pi that will mimic the Arduino, but at some point the devices are inexpensive enough, you might want to just use both. You have your master script running on here, and all the stuff that you need to happen in real time can be on the microcontroller. And then you can just interface through the serial ports.
So I just got an actual arcade machine over the weekend, and I was considering using Raspberry Pi as kind of the main emulator, actually hooking up the joystick that came with it to it. Would I be using those pins that you mentioned in the last question before that?
You can, but I'd recommend a JPAC or an iPac, which is it's a USB to the actual pin output. And I actually restore and collect arcade games, so if you want to talk afterwards about how you can set that up, because it's kind of, it can go on for a while.
Roll on arcades. Can you turn that into a full step mini cabinet?
I've tried. No. The problem with Step Mini is right now, what it uses with Python isn't supported. I think it's using, I forget why. There was something that just wouldn't compile on it. So there might be a Python knockoff, like PyDDR, that might work. But right now, Step Mini does not work. And that sucks. I know it. I really want it to work. But that's something to look into, like maybe a Pygame version, which will work on this. But, yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, what advantages the Raspberry Pi had over other small computers that are out there right now, like the Intuit or.
So, like the MK, they have a bunch of different numbers out that they're like little mini Android machines, and they're only like $40, $50. They're computers in a USB drive. They're both, all of those are really awesome. In fact, I have a couple. I have a BeagleBone. I have, or a BeagleBoard, the predecessor to that. I have the VIO, which is another mini board. The one thing I would say that this has over all of them is the community. Because it's one board and it's being done by a nonprofit foundation, they have a huge forum of people that are just coming together to work on this. And it's about 90% open source, which some of the others are lacking drivers and such. But the biggest thing is the community around this. You know, 1 million sold, 1 million out there, distributors are working on it. There's a huge vendor space that's working to make tons of add-ons and cases and all sorts of fun stuff. So, again, community. That's why I recommend the Raspberry Pi at the moment. If you want to get some more horsepower, if you want to go into some more uncharted territories and try, try something with a better graphics core, more like quad-core CPUs, by all means, go with some of the all-winner A10 devices, some of the like the BeagleBone Black that has quad-core, I believe at the moment. Go with those because they're awesome. They're really powerful devices. If you want a lot of support, a lot of community, and a lot of projects being done, and a lot of images you can download from, go with the Raspberry Pi. Any other questions? Cool.
Are you going to talk about your new book?
Oh,
Announce it?
I don't know why I forgot that. So I got tapped by Pack Publishing to write a book on gaming on the Raspberry Pi. So I'm hoping that gets released. I just finished it. It should be released in like a month or so, and it's going to have all the different emulators, there's different iDistribution, a couple other distributions out there that are more for console gaming, how to set it up, how to move all your ROM files to there, and all sorts of fun stuff that you can do with it. So that's supposed to be out, it's going to be like $6. It's going to be an ebook and published form on Amazon. So it's going to be Raspberry Gaming on the Raspberry Pi by Shea, Silverman, that's me. And hope you all buy it, because that would be really awesome. But I really hope you guys enjoy the Raspberry Pi. All of you should go get one right now. And thank you. We have like a couple minutes. If anybody wants to try out like any of the emulators or play any other games, by all means, come on up and try it.
I want to play.
All right, what do you want to play? Street Fighter, Mario, what about Shrew? That's good.
I kind of want to see it.
It's weird. It's just ridiculous.
Still, I might skip the way I only have now, but I actually said it.
All right, you know.
I wanted to check out. Absolutely. They are, I think you're the only one here that has these catering to everyone else is downstairs. Their catering field is not there.
Yeah.
So they can.
All right.
To be fair, if you're an entrepreneur, if you have a venture, if you have a project,
That happened.
coaching, guidance.
For the we got like the others got out early and we all just lined up out here, and then when this group got out, they all so.
Normally the happens. I want to put them.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, it's okay.
There's this here.
Yeah.
Really wary.
Thank you for reminding me.
You could always run an experiment.
I'm here for it.
See what they would do.
Well, it's tough. It would be easy to do, but it's had good ideas.
I knew if there was like a highway to get ideas, I had to put like reality.
So,
Oh my god, I have so many that I could waste.
Not really.
I just feel like I have ideas all day
We'll see
long.
if anyone stays and sticks around.
Stop getting it in reality.
But it is
CSS specific.
Yeah. Already outputs. What happened?
Oh, yeah.
I lost.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So, and of course, the only one I really wanted was the outbound machine, and I got to be more of the.
I really like the flight simulator game. Those are
Oh.
but you
Oh,
gotta
I haven't unlocked the,
You have to run, jump, and then dump Yoshi.
yeah.
That's how you go forward. You have to.
Which doesn't
You
know
have
what the control is.
Oh,
it was wide button on the controller.
I think it was B, wasn't
The mapping could be really off on that too.
it? But let's be fair. I think you're just gonna die.
Yeah.
Oh.
As far as like bringing
Oh, you're next.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Yeah, let me get some of this stuff.
Because it has to do with this Comic-Con library. Why you can't run StepMania? I want to know why you can't run StepMania. I built StepMania machines. You remember, Justin?
No, I developed.
Oh, God. Save it with me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it had the in the groove 2 in that machine or something like that.
Yeah, because it had a full motherboard.
But then when you swapped it out from the actual computer and put StepMania on it.
And put all the